June 6, 1944, dawn breaks grey and angry over the Normandy coast, and a 19-year-old kid from Des Moines, Iowa, named Sergeant Raymond Ray Gallagher crouches behind a shattered stone wall on Omaha Beach, clutching a weapon the Germans laughed at for 2 straight years. The 57mm M1 anti-tank gun. Back in Berlin they called it a toy, a door knocker, something that couldn't punch through real German steel. Ray's hands shake as the first Panzer IV rumbles toward him, turret swinging like the finger of death. He whispers the same line he wrote to his little sister back home 2 nights earlier: "If I don't make it, tell Mom I tried to be brave." The loader slams around into the breach, Ray squeezes the trigger, and the whole world finds out the Germans were dead wrong. The story of the 57mm M1 is the story of American boys who refused to quit even when the enemy, and sometimes their own generals, thought their gun was a joke. It's the story of a weapon that started life as a British hammerdown, got reborn in American factories, and ended the war feared from the hedgerows of Normandy to the frozen forests of the Battle of the Bulge. And it's the story of thousands of young men who dragged that 2,800-pound beast through mud, snow, and blood because they believed it could save their buddies' lives. This is how a gun the Germans dismissed became one of the deadliest tank killers the US Army ever fielded. Long before D-Day, long before most Americans even knew what a Panzer looked like, the British were already bleeding on the battlefields of France and North Africa. Their own 2-pounder anti-tank gun was brave, but by 1940 it was bouncing rounds off German tanks like marbles off a brick wall. Desperate, they took an old World War I 6-pounder, bored it out, slapped on a longer barrel, and created the Ordnance QF 6-pounder. It worked. It really worked. But Britain couldn't make enough of them fast enough, so they turned to their new ally across the Atlantic and basically said, "Please copy this, and please hurry." American industry looked at the British design, shrugged, and said, "We can do better." They lengthened the barrel even more, beefed up the carriage, added a better muzzle brake, and by early 1943 the 57mm gun M1 rolled off the lines, essentially a hot-rodded version of the British gun, built to American standards of toughness and mass production. The Army wasn't sure what to think at first. The old 37mm gun, the one that rode with the infantry since 1940, was light, handy, and totally outclassed. Generals argued in conference rooms, do we replace it with something heavier that's harder to move, or do we keep praying the 37 works? In the end, they did both. They kept thousands of 37s in service and started shipping the new 57mm overseas. Soldiers took one look at the thing, almost 3 tons with a limber, wheels taller than some of the crew, and nicknamed it the 57 or sometimes just 57 tons of fun. They had no idea how much they were going to love it. First blood came in North Africa, late 1942. A young lieutenant from Pennsylvania named Joseph Kowalski commands a platoon of brand new M1s attached to the 1st Infantry Division. The Germans still think American anti-tank guns are a bad joke. They roll their Panzer III straight at Kowalski's positions outside El Geta like it's a Sunday drive. Joe's gun crews, kids who learned to fire the piece in the Louisiana mud only months earlier, wait until the Panzers are 800 yards out. The 57 speaks. 6-pound armor-piercing rounds moving at 2,900 feet per second slice through 80mm of German frontal armor like it isn't even there. 4 burning tanks later, the German commander radios back a single stunned sentence, "The Americans have a new gun." Joe Kowalski writes home that night, "Mom, today we stopped being the little brother. Today we hit back." Word spreads fast in the desert. German tankers start calling the 57 Der Türklopfer mit Böse Überraschung, the door knocker with the nasty surprise. But the real test is still coming, because North Africa is one thing. Fortress Europe is something else entirely. Fast forward to the freezing winter of 1943. American and British factories are churning out 57s by the thousands. Every infantry regiment gets its own anti-tank company, usually 12 of the guns. Crews train until they can unlimber, sight, and fire in under 2 minutes. They practice in rain, in snow, in the Louisiana heat that feels nothing like Normandy but teaches them to sweat together. A private from Brooklyn named Anthony Tony Russo keeps a picture of his girl taped inside the gun shield. Every time they drill he kisses it and says, "This one's for you, Marie." His buddies laugh, but they all have their own good luck charms, letters from home, a lucky coin, a rabbit's foot. They know the 57 is good, but they also know no gun wins a war by itself. It's the boys behind it that matter. Spring 1944. The invasion of Europe is coming, and nobody is sure the 57mm is going to be enough. Intelligence reports say the Germans have Tigers, 88mm guns, armor up to 120mm thick in places. The 57's best round, the new armor-piercing composite rigid shot, can punch through about 90mm at 500 yards if it hits just right. Against a Tiger's frontal armor, that's a maybe at best. Ordnance officers argue for bigger guns, 76mm, 90mm, anything. But there isn't time, and there aren't enough bigger guns to go around. So the 57mm M1 becomes the main anti-tank weapon for the infantry divisions that will storm Normandy. Thousands of them load onto landing ships, wrapped in Cosmoline, stowed in the holds like sleeping giants. And then comes June 6th. D-Day. On Omaha Beach, the first 57s come ashore with the fifth wave, towed behind duplex-drive Sherman tanks that mostly sank. The guns hit the shingle wet and cold, but the crews are already moving. Sergeant Ray Gallagher, the kid from Iowa we met at the beginning, is with the 16th Infantry Regiment, 1st Division. His gun, serial number 4472, is dragged up the beach by 6 men slipping in blood and sand. They muscle it behind the seawall just as a pair of Panzer IVs from the 352nd Division come nosing down the E1 draw. Ray's crew has exactly 1 minute to get into action. They do it in 45 seconds. The first round screams out, hits the lead Panzer square in the driver's plate, and the tank erupts in flame. The second Panzer tries to reverse, but Ray's gun speaks again. 2 tanks, 2 kills, less than 2 minutes. Ray looks at his shaking hands and realizes he isn't shaking anymore. All across Omaha and Utah the same thing happens. The 57mm is light enough that determined crews can manhandle it into hedges, orchards, and ruined houses. It's accurate enough that a good gunner can put a round through a vision slit at 1,000 yards. And the Germans, who spent years laughing, suddenly aren't laughing anymore. By nightfall on D-Day, over 100 German armored vehicles lie smoking in Normandy, and a shocking number of them have neat 57mm holes burned clean through their armor. But the real love affair between the American soldier and the 57mm begins in the Bocage, that nightmare country of chest-high earth banks topped with thick hedges. Tanks can't see over them, can't shoot through them. But a 57mm crew can dig the gun's trail spade into the back of a hedgerow, poke the barrel through a hole no wider than a dinner plate, and wait. A kid from Alabama named Private First Class Billy Ray Thompson writes home in July, "Mama, it's like hunting deer back home, only the deer shoot back with 75mm cannons." Billy's gun destroys 3 Stoogie assault guns in one afternoon outside St. Lo. He never tells his mother that the last German vehicle was only 15 yards away when he fired, close enough that the German commander was still screaming when the round detonated inside. The 57 earns new nicknames now: the Bocage Buster, Hitler's Headache, the Sniper Cannon. Crews paint girls' names on the barrels: Marie, Betty, Dolores, just like the bomber boys do. They share cigarettes with infantry they've never met before because those grunts know one thing for certain: if a 57 is covering the road, they might actually live through the day. And the personal stories keep coming. There's Corporal Eddie Slovic, no, not that Eddie Slovic, a different one, who carries a crumpled letter from his wife in every pocket. He tells his crew if he dies they have to mail it for him. Outside Corentin, his gun takes a direct hit from an 88. When medics reach the position, they find Eddie draped over the breach, already gone, the letter still clutched in his hand. They mail it. His wife gets it 3 months later with a simple note from the loader: "He saved the whole company. We thought you should know." By August, the Allies break out of Normandy, and the 57mm goes on the offensive. Now the gun crews ride their pieces into battle like cavalry used to ride horses, bouncing across French fields, wheels spinning, chasing the retreating Germans. In one famous action near Argentan, 9 57s from the 90th Infantry Division set up in a sunken road and ambush an entire company of Panther tanks trying to escape the Falaise pocket. When the smoke clears, 15 Panthers are burning hulks and the road is blocked for miles. A war correspondent counts the hits. Every single German tank has at least 157mm penetration. The Germans surrender in droves, hands up, shouting no more 57. No more. But the honeymoon doesn't last forever. Fall turns to winter, and the Germans unveil their heaviest tanks yet: King Tigers, Jag Tigers, armor so thick the 57's standard round sometimes just dents it. Crews learn new tricks fast. They aim for tracks, for turret rings, for the thin armor over engine decks. They beg bazooka teams to work with them, one weapon flushing the monster into the open, the other finishing it. And sometimes they just refuse to run. In the snowy hell of the Ardennes, December 1944, the Battle of the Bulge erupts, and the 57mm gets its final exam. Take the little town of St. Vith. A handful of American anti-tank companies, most armed with 57s, hold the northern shoulder against the entire 6th Panzer Army. One of them is Battery B, 801st Tank Destroyer Battalion, technically equipped with towed 3-inch guns, but half their pieces are 57s because that's what they had left. For 6 straight days they fight in blinding snow, temperatures 20 below zero. Sergeant Olaf Swede Carlson from Minnesota keeps his crew alive by melting snow on the gun barrel for drinking water. On the 5th day a King Tiger lumbers straight at them, 150mm of frontal armor gleaming like a battleship. Swede waits until the monster is 50 yards away, then puts 3 hypervelocity armor-piercing rounds into the driver's viewport, one of the only places on the entire tank thin enough to penetrate. The King Tiger slews sideways, blocks the road, and the entire German attack stalls for hours. Swede earns the Distinguished Service Cross and a trip home he never takes because he insists on staying with his crew. Everywhere you look in the Bulge there are stories like that. A 57mm crew from the 82nd Airborne holds a crossroads outside Stavelot long enough for the 30th Infantry Division to arrive. 4 guns, 16 men, facing 20 Panthers and a company of Panzer Grenadiers. When it's over only 1 gun is still firing, manned by a corporal who lost an arm hours earlier and refuses evacuation. He keeps loading and firing one-handed until reinforcements finally reach him at dusk. His name is Technical Sergeant Woodrow Woody Jenkins from Texas, and years later schoolchildren in Belgium still lay flowers at the spot where he stood. By January 1945 the Bulge is crushed, and the 57mm has done things no one thought possible. Official kill claims, always conservative, credit the gun with over 1,800 confirmed tank and assault gun destructions from D-Day to the end of the war. Unofficial counts from the crews themselves are double that. And those are just the tanks. No one ever bothers counting the half-tracks, trucks, and bunkers the 57 shredded. Spring comes, the Rhine is crossed, and the 57mm rolls into the heart of Germany itself. The last great tank battle in the West happens outside the town of Dessau in April. Elements of the 2nd Armored Division, supported by towed 57s from the 413th Anti-Aircraft Artillery, catch a mixed force of brand new Panthers and ancient Panzer IVs trying to escape eastward. In a running fight that lasts all afternoon the 57s claim 21 kills, many at ranges over 2,000 yards. 1 gun, commanded by Master Sergeant Frank Caputo from New Jersey, knocks out 5 Panthers single-handed. Frank's loader swears the barrel is glowing red by the end. And then, almost before anyone is ready, it's over. The guns fall silent along the Elbe River. American soldiers shake hands with Red Army troops, pose for pictures, and start to realize they're going home. The 57mm M1, the gun the Germans laughed at, ends the war having fired its last angry shot somewhere in central Germany, barrel pointed at a sky that finally belongs to the Allies. In the years after the war the 57 fades quickly. Bigger guns, better tanks, new doctrines. Most of the pieces are scrapped or sold to smaller nations. A few end up as gate guardians at army posts, Fort Benning, Fort Knox, quiet monuments that almost nobody stops to read. But if you know where to look you can still find them. And if you're really lucky you might meet an old man in a VFW hall who will roll up his sleeve, show you a faded unit tattoo, and tell you about the time he and 5 other boys dragged a 57mm gun through a burning village to save a company of riflemen they'd never even met. That old man will tell you the gun wasn't magic. It wasn't the biggest or the heaviest. What made it deadly was the American kids who refused to believe it was outclassed. Kids who wrote letters home they never expected to mail, who kissed pictures of sweethearts taped to gun shields, who stood their ground when everything said run. They turned a British design built in American factories into something the German Panzer Force learned to fear more than the Jabos overhead or the Shermans on the horizon. So next time you drive past one of those quiet memorials, slow down for just a second. Think about Ray Gallagher on Omaha Beach, Joe Kowalski in the desert, Swede Carlson in the snow, Woody Jenkins missing an arm but still firing, Frank Caputo with the glowing barrel. Think about the thousands of others whose names never made the citations. They were 19, 20, 21 years old. They came from farms and factories and city streets, and they carried a gun the enemy dismissed right up until the moment it sent them to Valhalla. The 57mm M1 wasn't the biggest anti-tank gun of World War II. It wasn't the most powerful. But in the hands of American boys who loved their country and loved each other more than they feared death, it was enough. More than enough. It helped win the war. And every time a German tanker saw that long barrel poke out of a hedgerow and heard the whip-crack of a 6-pound shell coming his way, he remembered one simple truth: never, ever underestimate an American with something to prove.